This video will cover section 1.3, part 1, the midpoint formula. Students will be able to find the coordinates of the midpoint of a segment in the coordinate plane. First, let's review the midpoint formula. The midpoint formula states that the coordinates of the midpoint M of segment AB with endpoints x1, y1, and x2, y2 are the following. So we can see our formula right here, where we add the x's and divide by 2, and we add the y's and divide by 2. And essentially, you can almost think of this as being the average of the x's, comma, the average of the y's. And we have to make sure that we always rewrite it in this ordered pair, so the parentheses, comma, and our second set of parentheses. Now let's talk about where this formula comes from. If I want to find the location of the midpoint, so if I'm assuming that my midpoint is about here, we need to figure out where it is located. Now, in order to do so, what we can do is we could say that, for example, the midpoint of this horizontal segment is the same as the midpoint of the full segment. So if I want to find this ordered pair, we know that the y value is the same for both of these points. However, the x values change. So essentially, I'm considering these two x values and I'm finding half of the distance. So my x coordinate would be x1 plus x2 over 2. So my ordered pair of this midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, y1. Now for the second point, we know that this midpoint is going to be straight across from here. So while the x coordinate for both of these is the exact same, the distance here is going to be the average of the y's. So I can call this, it's x2, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2. And now if I want to look at this ordered pair, we can see that the x coordinate is going to line up with the x coordinate from here. So my x coordinate of the midpoint would be x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, the y coordinate would be the y coordinate of this length over here because it's straight across. So it would be y1 plus y2 all over 2. Now, you're never going to be tested or expected to memorize or be able to explain this, but this is just so you conceptually understand where the formula is coming from. In our first example, we're given that QS has endpoints of 3, 5, and 7, negative 9. Find the coordinates of the midpoint. Now, if we remember, our midpoint formula tells us that we have x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to label our points. So I could call Q x1, y1, and x, s2, x2, y2. It doesn't matter how you choose to label them as long as you're consistent with keeping the x1 and y1 together and x2 and y2 together. Now for my formula, we know that it's always set up such as this, so it's over 2 and over 2. And now we're just filling in from up above. So first I need the x1 coordinate, which is 3. So I can fill in a 3 plus the x2 coordinate, which I can fill in as being 7. So I have 3 plus 7, comma, the y1 coordinate, which we can see is 5. So I can fill in a 5 plus the y2 coordinate, which we can see is -9. So I can fill in a -9. Now we're just going to simplify to get our answer. So if I add 3 plus 7 gives me 10 over 2. 5 plus -9 is -4 over 2. And then if I finish simplifying, 10 plus 10 over 2 is 5. And -4 over 2 is -2. So your final answer should be 5, comma, -2. Pause the video and try this example on your own. Now, if I were to approach solving this one, we know that our formula for the midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. So essentially, it's the average of the x's. So the first thing I need to do is fill in or name the points as x1, y1, and x2, y2. So I can call this x1, y1, and x2, y2. Then we need to substitute into the formula. So I have my x1 value is 2, my x2 value is 6, my y1 value is -5, and my y2 value is 13. And we can see when I fill in the formula, I end up getting, so I fill in a 2 plus my x2 is 6, comma, my y1 is -5, and my y2 is 13. Now we just have to simplify the expression. So if I combine, the 2 and 6 gives me 8, the -5 and 13 give me 8, and then lastly I simplify to get 4, comma 4. So your final answer here would be 4, 4, making sure we have our parentheses with the comma in the middle. The next example says the midpoint of xy has coordinate 4, -6. X has coordinates of 2, -3. Find the coordinates of y. We'll notice that the biggest difference in this problem is that we are given one endpoint and a midpoint, and you're being asked to find the other endpoint. Okay, now if I set this up, we can kind of visualize our scenario. So I have the segment X with the ordered pair of 2, -3. The midpoint is given to me here as being at 4, -6. And the coordinates of y are what is unknown. So I'm going to write those in as being blanks. Okay. Now, there's different ways to approach this. The most straightforward way is you want to see what happens when I go from one x to the next. So essentially what we're doing is I'm saying, okay, if this is my first x and this is my second x, what do I do to get from this value of 2 to this value of 4? So 2 plus what would equal 4? And if we think about it, what value should fill in here? This is going to have to be that we're adding the value of 2. So if that's the distance to get from the endpoint to one midpoint, I'm going to have to do the same thing to get to my other endpoint as well. So to get from here to here, I'm going to have to add 2 again. So if I add 4 plus 2, that gives me a value of 6. So I can fill in a 6 here as well. Now we're going to do the same process with the y coordinates. So my first y is -3, and my next y is -6. So we're asking ourselves, what do I do to get from this -3 to this -6? So -3 plus what would give me -6? And if we think about that, to get from -3 to -6, you would have to subtract 3, which means to get from my midpoint y to the other endpoints y, you're going to have to subtract 3 again. So I would have -6 minus 3 equals negative 9. So my answer here would be that the coordinates of y are at 6, negative 9. Pause the video and try this example on your own. Now, in this example, if we read what we are given, we have the midpoint of segment AB is m is 33, 4. The other endpoint of A is negative 3, negative 2. What is the coordinates of the other endpoint B? So if we think about it, my one endpoint that I'm given is negative 3, 2. So I have A is at negative 3, negative 2. My midpoint is at 3, 4. And we need to figure out what I'm going to have to do to get to B. So if I want to get from A of negative 3 to the x coordinate of m, so from negative 3 to the value of 3, we have to think about what would you add to get there. So if I consider that, we're saying, okay, what do I do to negative 3? What would I add to get 3? And the value you would have to add there is you would have to add 6. So to get from this x to the next x, I'm going to add 6 again, which means I'm going to have 3 plus 6, which gives me 9. So my x coordinate is 9. For the second part of the problem, for y, I have my first y is negative 2, and my second y is 4. So I want to ask myself, what do I do to get from negative 2 to 4? So negative 2 plus what would give me 4? And if I think about it, coincidentally, you end up having to add 6 again. So to get from this 4 over to my new y, I'm going to have to add 6 again. So if I do 4 plus 6, gives me a value of 10. So my y coordinate is 10. So our answer here should be that the coordinate of B should be 9, 10.